We are so close to the early access launch for Into the Radius 2, and this video will quite likely be the last time I'm sitting here talking about the game with no gameplay to show off. Just kidding, bitches! As it turns out, we are now allowed to show some Into the Radius 2 closed beta gameplay, so enjoy me stumbling around a minefield of anomalies while you listen to the rest of the development updates. In the last video we stopped at Dev Diary 11, and since then we've gotten 3 more Dev Diaries, so let's start things off with Diary number 12. The new UNPSC Explorer facility. So the base of ITR-1 could be best described as a survivalist den, a very improvised and modest place that reflected the current mood of the committee, which was bleak and desperate. From all the past explorers who made no progress for the UNPSC, we can get an understanding as to why the base was in the condition that we saw it in. But after the progress that we, Explorer number 61, made in the first game, the mood of the committee has drastically improved, as have their capabilities. The new base attempts to convey a new theme this time around, and as you can tell by the picture, it, quote, should feel like a prison where the player is confined by the UNPSC, a military field base where we are armed and equipped to face the dangers of the Pachorsk anomaly, and a home where we can rest, recover, organize our gear, and prepare for the next expedition into the Radius. The contrast between the Radius and the new base will be reflected in the look, feel, and sound of the UNPSC Explorer facility. The base is divided into zones and modules with their own functions, where some areas are available from the start, and some unlock over time as our security level goes up. There are several locations in this new base: the command room, the dormitory, the armory, the exchange counter, and the laboratory. The command room is the area where we will receive, accept, and turn in the missions we receive. The dormitory is a living module designed to house multiple explorers, an area for rest and recovery. We can arrange our weapons and gear here, as well as clean our weapons and sleep with the homies. The armory is an expansion of the dormitory, described by CM Games as a, quote, separate module for storing and organizing your equipment. Basically, it's overflow storage for lack of a better term. Next is the exchange room and supply depot, which is a current name for the new store. In here, we'll be able to buy and sell equipment, and even get up close and personal with the equipment with the ability to hold items before purchasing. Lastly, the laboratory, meant to be a station of artifact processing. Likely this is the area where we'll need to go in order to equip an artifact to a piece of gear, or upgrade the gear in some way. My guess is that it might work similarly to Stalker, but we haven't seen this concept yet. The new base will include all these main modules, and also several other zones and features that will be pleasant additions, and hopefully by that they mean a firing range, because that has not been mentioned yet. For early access, the modules that we'll have access to are the dormitory, with no weapon cleaning mechanics, command room, exchange counter, and the supply depot. That's all for Diary 12, now let's move on. Diary number 13 is all about the struggles of development for ITR2, past, present, and future. With ITR2 being the second game in the series, CM Games sees this as both good and bad, because it gives them a foundation to build from, but at the same time it doesn't afford them as much room to expand ideas, since they need to stay true to the original concept. They quote this as a delicate balance between preserving what was in the original and adding elements that will make the sequel a fully fledged new game. The game needs to be interesting to new and returning players alike, so that anyone from new to VR Timmy to the 1,000-hour ITR Chads can have a good time. Upon breaking down ITR-1 in order to formulate concepts for the sequel, at least 2 full concepts were rejected because of the idea not staying true to the original. After much discussion and debate, the conclusion the devs came to is that ITR2 needs to be the ultimate ITR1, where everything meaningful has been refined and where co-op and necessary changes have been added to make the second part perceived as a new game. Since co-op was a heavily requested feature during ITR1, we're getting it for ITR2. Yes, we already knew this. Instead of it being a separate mode though, it's another way to play single player. This decision to include co-op has brought on a whole host of unique challenges, as the implementation of the mode now has to be considered when designing nearly all game elements such as mechanics, interactions with objects, in-game interfaces, missions, etc. When designing new elements, they have to ask themselves, how will this work in co-op? So to keep the next paragraph of this diary short, they said co-op, quote, has been a nightmare for the technical team. Now for the biggest challenge, is the early access launch of the game. To get right out in front of it, they clearly state that, quote, often there's an expectation that an early access game is almost ready. ITR2 will enter EA in a very limited form due to us wanting to iterate on the game with community input. You will encounter bugs, and if you're the type that wants to jump in and play an early access game, you'd better be reporting them so the game can get better. Along with bugs, you will be missing features since they're obviously not ready for testing yet, and plenty of content will not be in the game yet. That's just how early access is. We'll wrap up this diary right here so we can jump into the next one, because diary number 14 is entirely about early access. First off, 2 days before the release of diary number 14, we finally got our early access start date. For those of you who haven't already heard, Wednesday, July 24th, 2024 is the day we'll finally be able to start testing ITR2. With that out of the way, let's get into what to expect and what not to expect when testing begins. Full price for ITR2 is $40. In order to play the early access, you will have to purchase the game at full price. Quite an obvious point to myself and to many, but the devs wanted to be extra clear that there will not be the same amount of content at the start of ITR2 early access that ITR1 currently has. It will also not nearly be as smooth as ITR1, and depending on your hardware, it could be even worse than others. The minimum requirements for the game are an Intel i5 7600K or Ryzen 5 3600, with an RTX 2060 or AMD equivalent and 16 gigabytes of RAM. That means regular RAM, not VRAM. I saw some people getting confused in the Steam comments. The recommended specs are an Intel i5 8600K or Ryzen 5 5600 with an RTX 3070 or AMD equivalent and also 16 gigabytes of RAM. I don't have an RTX 3070, but I have a Radeon 6700 XT. I think those are about the same, so if that's what you have, you're going to be fine. So, what should you expect for your $40 on July 24th? Well, you'll get a tutorial location, a small location, the new Explorer base, and a large location. And I mean fucking huge. This is way bigger than any Into the Radius 1 map. With these 4 areas, you can expect a few hours of gameplay just in the smaller starting map, and the main missions that will take you to the larger map to give another 5 to 10 hours of gameplay in the current form. The locations will be filled with the new anomalies and enemies, and it will all be subject to tuning as suggestions are made from you loyal testers. Anyway, progression is next. Early access will include a fully fledged initial tutorial location, which is not the same as the base or smaller map location that was mentioned earlier. It is completely different. We'll see a very basic implementation of the mission system with a new terminal for accepting and completing missions as well as browsing the map. There will be nearly a dozen top priority missions and several dozen side missions, missions with multiple stages and conditions, etc. Security levels will be increased as we play as well. That way we can unlock and test out the equipment that awaits us in the new store. For completing committee tasks, we'll be given at least a dozen different guns, and something new about this is that we can expect them to be in different configurations. Guns have been enhanced with new, more detailed animations, and we can now lock bolts back to chamber around. Now, this is a great attention to detail change. Ammo will be available in standard and tracer variants only at the start. The equipment we'll get from the start include probes, an artifact detector, the new tablet, several backpack types, 6 different types of chest rigs with varying configurations, flashlights, injectors, and other small items. Artifacts will be present in the early access with several different nest types as well. Now on to what we shouldn't expect at the start of early access. No story moments or episodes, which means narrative elements will only be present in the visual design and details. No weapon wear, cleaning, repair, or customizations. No hunger or recovery. No armor or helmets. No brand new enemy types, which this just means that there will only be the new mimic and the new spawn. No new tide implementation, which as we learned before, the tide is deadly. They plan to do something with this rather than have you just drop over dead when the timer hits, and personally I hope they come up with something that's similar to Stalker with the way that the missions work, but as of now it's just a very basic tide implementation. There will also be no difficulty settings, and last but not least, don't expect a perfectly stable co-op. If you have questions regarding what to and what not to expect, make sure to join the Into the Radius Discord, which will be linked in the description, and go to the Steam Community Hub to check over the developer diaries yourself, since I don't read these word for word. They will also be in the description. Oh, and one last thing. Expect progress wipes as we go through the testing periods of Into the Radius 2 Early Access. If you played Escape from Tarkov before, then you know exactly what this means, so I don't want to hear any bitching from the EFT players. And that's going to be it for the ITR2 news. Thanks a lot for being here and hanging out. Let me know down below how you're feeling about the early access. I know the $40 is probably going to push some people to wait a little bit, so if you're not going to be jumping in right away, let me know. I certainly will be. I'm going to shell out that money because I'm a shill, and you can watch me play and kind of make a decision from there. But that's going to be it. Thanks a lot for being here. I will see you guys in the next one.